You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. We've got two splendid guests today, one of whom will tell us why it is most people, as she puts it, suck and are stupid. What is the problem? And the other who will tell us, as a fantastic organizer, just what to do about that. There's also lots of news to get to, so before we get to the guests, let's go inside the headlines. Getting lost this week beneath headlines about whether Trump was heading the United States into a trade war or a real shooting war with China were two stories that presage what I'm afraid we can expect more about in the future. Texas has now joined at least 3 other states, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Indiana, that have called for the burial or cremation of aborted fetal remains. Anti-choice activists are escalating their attempts to make it harder for women to terminate unwanted pregnancies by creating new laws and rules that do 3 things at least. 1, make it more difficult for abortion providers to make this constitutionally legal procedure available. 2, shaming the women. And 3, by sadistically associating the procedure not with respectful treatment of people in medical care, but with death. The regulations in Indiana and Louisiana have not gone into effect yet, since there are lawsuits pending. The new Texas regulations apply not only to women who choose to abort in a health care facility, but also to women who miscarry at such facilities, as well as to women who undergo medically imperative abortions because of ectopic pregnancy. Naturally, such laws result in cases like that of Anna Yoka, age 32. For over an entire year now, she has been incarcerated in Rutherford County Jail in Tennessee, unable to raise bond set at $200,000, and charged with the attempted murder of a 24-week-old fetus in September of 2015. Anna had climbed into a bathtub and tried to abort with a coat hanger, causing her to bleed so profusely that she was taken to the hospital and forced to deliver. Now she faces new charges: aggravated assault, attempts to procure a miscarriage, and attempted criminal abortion, to all of which she has pled not guilty. The extremely strict law in Tennessee does permit abortions after 24 weeks, but only if the woman's life or health is demonstrably at risk. It also requires women to receive state-directed counseling and wait 48 hours before the procedure, which of course necessitates multiple trips to a clinic. Only 4 out of 95 counties in Tennessee have clinics, and Rutherford County is not one of them. This case is reminiscent of one in Indiana that became national news. There, Purvi Patel, an Indian woman, had been sentenced to 20 years after being convicted of feticide for taking pills to terminate her pregnancy and then delivering a fetus which the jury found died from neglect. The conviction was vacated on appeal. And guess who was the proud father of Indiana's extremist feticide law? Indiana Governor, now Vice President-elect Mike Penn. Well, I didn't want the above grim stories to fall between the cracks. And before we get to the rest of our news, which is not necessarily hidden inside the headlines, but still crucial, and it's actually worthy of some celebration, rare these days. But before we get there, an election update. Hillary's win is unprecedented in the modern history of U.S. presidential politics. She has already won the popular vote by a dramatically larger number of ballots than anyone in history who did not go on to be inaugurated as president. Her margin, now at 2.7 million, and still growing, is now bigger than the winning margins for John Kennedy and Richard Nixon. Results in a number of battleground states were so tight that a shift of around only 55,000 votes in only 3 states combined, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, would align the national popular vote result with the Electoral College result for a Hillary win. There are initiatives to address this mess. Some people propose abolishing the Electoral College. And there's also the bipartisan National Popular Vote Initiative, promoted by the reform group Fair Vote. It commits states to respect the national popular vote as part of a multi-state compact in which states with a majority of electoral votes commit to assign them to the candidate who gets the most votes. Don't look for much change about this with hard-right Republicans in power, but at least take comfort, although it's cold comfort, in the fact that despite all the Monday morning quarterbacking, blaming her and blaming her campaign and blaming women and blaming us and blaming her party, she did, in fact, win. It's not her fault. It's not our fault. Trump has no mandate. She won, we won. Now, all we need is the power to go with that triumph. But anyway, back to some good news for a change. We start with North Carolina. Ending a bitter, almost month-long stalemate, one-term Governor Pat McCrory finally conceded victory to Roy Cooper, a Democrat. McCrory had faced local and nationwide rage over a law he signed and defended that rolled back anti-discrimination protections for LGBT people, among other Pleistocene-era positions that he had taken. In another, oh my God, it's good news for a change development, we're all still cheering the triumph of First Peoples at Standing Rock in North Dakota. As Native activist leader Rebecca Adamson described on this program recently, these thousands of water protectors have spent months braving weather, police brutality, police dogs, intimidation, arrests, and water cannons in sub-zero weather, all to protect the land and water from an oil pipeline. They were joined last weekend by some 2,000 veterans from as far back as the Vietnam War and as recent as the Iraq War, who came from all over the country to form a barrier between protesters and law enforcement, which had pledged to remove them by last Monday. One of the vets, a former Marine, Vincent Emanuel, was quoted in the New York Times saying, "You might as well die for something that means something." And in a gesture that astonished the native peoples as well as the press, some of the veterans knelt and, as military members, asked forgiveness from the tribes for the centuries-long persecution of them, for treaty breaking, land seizure, child abduction, and attempted language erasure by the U.S. government. All of that enforced across the decades by the military. That's why they were apologizing. Standing Rock leaders also made a point of specifically expressing gratitude to President Obama for working feverishly behind the scenes with the Army Corps of Engineers to reroute the Dakota Access Pipeline and deny the oil companies a permit to cross native lands as originally planned. And to bring what seemed an impossible situation to a peaceful and environmentally and morally positive solution. They thanked him for all that. In the worst North Dakota blizzard in years, some of the protesters have elected to remain at the site until the matter is decisively settled, out of fear that incoming President Trump will undo Obama's accomplishment. And in our last item, nearly 500 Muslim and Jewish women, many wearing headscarves and skullcaps, gathered on December 4th at Drew University in Madison, New Jersey, at the largest such meeting ever held in the United States. It was the third annual conference of the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, which is a grassroots group now claiming 50 chapters in more than 20 states. Sisterhood chapters keep track of anti-Muslim and anti-Semitic incidents across the country, tracking them and reporting them on their Facebook page and on other social media. The Sisterhood is one of several groups expanding work on Muslim-Jewish relations, including the Foundation for Ethnic Understanding and the Anti-Defamation League. But the women's group is the most grassroots one, and being women functions more personally, understanding that the personal is, after all, still political. So when Vasim Firdas, age 56, a manufacturing manager at ExxonMobil, who's lived in the United States for 2 years, when she referred to Germany in the 1930s as she asked older Jewish women in the group, "When did you know when it was time to leave?" One Jewish woman answered that the ones that didn't believe, they're the ones who went to Auschwitz. Still, another woman, Mahala Morrow Jones, who's trying to build the first West Coast chapter of the Sisterhood in Santa Barbara, California, she also answered, vowing that, quote, "If Muslims have to register, we're all going to register. You've got to believe it, sister." Close quote. The veterans, the First Peoples and Water Protectors, the Muslim and Jewish Sisterhood, these are the voices of hope. These are the voices of the future, if there is to be a future. We have to take a short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, but I'll be back directly with my first guest, who has an enormously popular blog, Awesomely Luvvie, and who is celebrating her first book. So, coming right up. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. And have I got a treat for you? My first guest today is Luvvie Ajayi, Ajayi. Luvvie is a New York Times best-selling author now. Her new book, which we'll discuss, is based on her blog, extremely popular blog, Awesomely Luvvie. She's the founder of the Red Pump Project, which we will discuss. She is a digital strategist, a speaker, a culture critic, and an activist, a humorist, a former contributing editor and columnist for The Griot, and she's been featured in Essence and The Root and on BET. She's also been leveraging her background in marketing, communications, and new media to talk about branding and blogging and activism and nonprofits and humor. So the spread is pretty encyclopedic. She's an alum of the University of Illinois, and she's spoken on various notable stages, ranging from the National Association of Black Journalists to, the White House. She's funny and smart and a friend, and she's, well, awesome. So here is Luvvie Ajayi. Luvvie, welcome back.
So good to be back.
Well, a lot has happened since the last time you were on this program. That was a few years ago when you received the Women's Media Center's Social Media Award for your incredible blog, which has Awesomely Luvvie, which has become even more popular now, has 500,000 readers. Wow. And then gave birth to the book. And the book is a bestseller already with both the New York Times and the Washington Post. So let me start by congratulations, my dear.
Thank you so much.
The book is called I'm Judging You, the Do Better Manual. It's all the way from pop culture to racism and politics, isn't it?
Absolutely. My book covers from the mundane to the serious, to the random pet peeves that we have. And I covered the wide variety of topics because my blog does that. You know, I didn't want to pigeonhole myself in this first book because, I'm judging us for a lot of things.
I love that. I mean, when you say this book is an excuse for me to judge people and things, which is just so refreshing for a change. And among the things that you take on, are not only funny things like, why do most people really just suck? Why are they dumb and stupid and cruel and stuff? Which these days is such a good question to ask. And why does one of those people seem poised for the presidency? But
oh my god.
But also you're a digital strategist, so you critique the use of the internet and the way it's being used, which is like a theme on this program. So talk about that.
One, I think humans are ridiculous because we're not that introspective all the time, like we should be.
Yep.
So this book attempts to turn the mirror on all of us and be like, look how ridiculous we are. We should probably fix that. And so it's broken into 4 sections: life, culture, social, fame. And yeah, my digital strategy comes in the social media section because I talk about things like, I think the first chapter in that section is called #IHateYour#abuse because there are far too many people who are using 35 hashtags for one picture because they heard that will increase engagement. No, that's ridiculous.
Right.
Well,
you're also absolutely hilarious about the kind of posts that people think are interesting to put on Facebook or other social media. The one about why would you put a photograph of your grandmother in her coffin on your Facebook post and think we are interested? What a gross thing. My God, it's a very funny section.
I feel like there's things that we all do every single day that's just like face palm worthy. So I kicked off the book like that so people can at least kind of be like, yes, this is the kind of book where I'll be reading along and nodding. Yeah. Like, yep, I know that person. Yep, I've seen that.
You want to put exclamation marks in the margin.
My copy editor did that when she was going through my book.
Yeah.
Certain sections where she actually really identified what she put notes. In the notes, she put, oh my gosh, yes.
What are you, since you are a digital strategist, and what's your take on this whole new fake news misery that we're facing? Is that just part of...
I hate it.
Yeah.
I've actually written about fake news a long time ago because I realized people stopped discerning between what's real and believable and what is just trolling online.
That's right.
And people kept on giving it the same weight.
Yeah.
And giving it the same type of time. And I'm just like, that's not real. That's from a website that has satire at the bottom. Yeah. And for me, I think it's really important for us to be way more media literate, where we can figure out, okay, this is not the news that I'm going to give credence to. And I don't understand how people constantly fall for fake news.
Yeah. Well, probably people who read your blog don't, because they're probably self-selecting smarter people. But it, you're absolutely right. When the Oxford English Dictionary has a new entry this year, the word of the year is post-truth. It's a reason to get really depressed. Any ideas about what we do about that? Because you spend so much time creatively and affirmatively in that social media realm.
I think it's important for those of us who speak the truth to be as loud as we possibly can. A lot of time people who listen to fake news or just like absorb a lot of gossip tend to be where you have to kind of grab them in the face and be like, hey, that's actually not true. So honestly, I use my platform a lot of times to debunk things that are traveling around that are not true. So I'm the person who's posting on Facebook, hey, you guys, that piece that's trending, that's not accurate. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important for those types of people to make sure they're on the job, because right now, even mainstream media is failing at reporting real news and well-researched news. People are just being in the culture of first. I want to be the first person to drop this news, but you haven't done the research to find out if it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a wonderful speech recently by Krishanti Dhamaraj when she received an award, and she let loose, you can find it online, she let loose with this extraordinary speech where she said, I am not, our job as journalists is not to be neutral, it's to tell the truth. And that's an interesting and important, crucial distinction, I think. Since you have such a beloved voice online, the kind of stands that you take about this, I think, are extra important because they'll listen to you.
If I can make one more person a little bit more discerning about the news that they consume online or otherwise, then I think I'll be doing a little bit of a decent job. It's really important that we start to question the sources that we get our news from and to start looking beyond headlines and doing our own research and double-checking Google because it's not busy. It's free. It's right there. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people just react and see a post on Facebook and they share it without reading. what the post is about. They figure they know what it means by the headline. They don't look at the source. And before you know it, everyone has shared the same false news and accepted it as fact.
That's right. That's right. It's terrifying. I mean, and we now will have a president who does the same thing. Oh my God.
Oh my God. The whole thing is just like upsetting.
Talk for a minute about race in this last election, because I believe that racism and sexism are what really motivated him getting any votes at all. Talk about that.
One of my friends called it the old guard's last stand. The fact that, we've made progress. We had a black president for the last 8 years. The racists were kind of building themselves up to be like, oh, well, we need to get back to the way it was. But here's the thing. The thing that disappointed me the most, I think, about this election result is the fact that 53% of white women who voted for him.
Yeah.
And for me, I think it was a really big show of how deep internalized patriarchy is.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of women looked at Hillary and said, you know what, I don't trust myself to rule, so I don't trust her to rule.
Exactly.
And it was definitely a statement, and wow, you saw this woman who actually represents your interests, who would, every time she walks in a room, she is a white woman, and she's able to speak up for you, and you didn't even stand for her. Yeah. So that was a huge shock.
Yeah, and we know from exit polls that most of those women thought of it to themselves as if it's not that I'm voting for him, I'm voting against her. So you're absolutely right.
Right.
And of course there was in the general right wing and in the uneducated part of the population, there was this oh my God, just what you said. Oh my God, we've had 8 years of an African American, and now you're going to follow that with a woman? Oh, that's too much. Yeah. No, that's just too much. That's right.
And they were like, no, it's too much. But here's the thing is, you don't cut off your nose to spite your face. And that's essentially what they did. This man doesn't represent anybody's interest besides white, straight men who are really rich.
Right.
So the only people who will benefit from him being president are straight white men who are really rich.
Yeah.
Everybody else
is screwed.
Suffer for it.
That's right.
Screwed. Like completely. So, I mean, and he's basically an internet troll, which is, he spends more time on Twitter now than he even did before.
I know.
Which is fascinating because this man is supposed to hold the nuclear code. Can you imagine? He might start a war of somebody sending him a bad retweet.
That's right. Well, that's what Clinton used to say. That's what Hillary used to say. Remember, a man who can be baited by a tweet should not have his finger on the nuclear button. And so, it's a pretty scary period. It's, I couldn't recommend more that people read your book because it doesn't evade issues, but it does, given its wit, make you able to laugh about them. Let's take a minute before we have to close and talk about the Red Pump Project. It's still going on, and what is it? And let's give its website.
So the Red Pump Project is the nonprofit that I co-founded 7 years ago with a friend of mine, Karen Watkins. We raise awareness about the impact of HIV and AIDS on women and girls. And we do it by wearing red shoes and using those as a conversation starter. We do events around the country to empower, to educate women and girls, to say, you know what, if you're not living with this epidemic, you shouldn't get it. Here's how you stay safe. If you are, we're standing with you. So we give prevention tools. We talk about decreasing the stigma. And we also say, you know what, this conversation around HIV and AIDS should not always be shrouded around secrecy and around the severe town hall. No, we will meet you where you're at a lounge, at a brunch, at a fashion show, and we'll talk about this epidemic. We'll talk about it on Twitter or Facebook. So Red Pump's website is redpump.org.
Redpump.org, folks. And it's just terrific. So are you, and so is this book, which Shonda Rhimes gave a quote to, saying that it was absolutely marvelous, and she was, as usual, right. It is called I'm Judging You, the Do Better Manual, and it, exposes why people suck and what we can do about ourselves and each other so as not to suck and be dumb and stupid and hurtful. And I adore you. Be sure and run out and buy a copy. It's already a bestseller. I'm judging you, the Do Better Manual. And of course, her blog is awesomely lovey, with 500,000 readers, and you should be their listeners among them. Big hug to you, Luvvie. And again, congratulations.
Robin, I'm a huge fan of yours. You're amazing. So can't wait to give you a hug again.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. Oh dear, so much surrealism, so little time. Well, let's start with President-elect Donald Trump's choice for National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who you will recall was dumped from the Defense Intelligence Agency because when he was there, his subordinates even nicknamed his management style as Flynn facts. In other words, facts that he had completely made up, and run with, and that they were expected to follow. He is a downright, outright, upright Islamophobe who has said that Islam is a cancer that needs to be cut out. He's crazy in lots of other ways as well. But I'm focusing today on his Islamophobia and why it needs to be, cut out of the body politic. Always a really scary metaphor when people begin referring to cutting out things and ideas as if they were cancers. And so it's important to look at a fact that is not a Flynn fact, but, an actual fact. The Associated Press has reported that based on a coding system developed by whatever ISIS is, that is the Islamic State, that is Daesh, whatever their equivalent of human resource management is, 70% of recruits in 2013 to 2014 had at best a basic knowledge of Islam. According to a trove of more than 3,000 leaked documents, only 5% of recruits indicated they had an advanced knowledge of the world's largest religion before signing on to the group. Now, nor has this data changed in the intervening time up till now. At the height of Daesh's drive for foot soldiers, which was in 2013 and 2014, typical recruits included the group of Frenchmen who went bar hopping with their recruiter back home, the recent European convert who now hesitantly describes himself as gay, and 2 British men who ordered the Quran for Dummies and Islam for Dummies from Amazon to prepare for jihad abroad. So their intake process was then completed, and they were grouped in safe houses as a stream of Islamic State imams came to indoctrinate them. One of them said later on, the 32-year-old European recruit speaking to the AP on condition of anonymity, he said, "I realized I was in the wrong place when they began to ask me questions on these forms like, quote, 'When you die, who should we call?' That made him a little bit worried. I can relate to his concern." The Islamic State's most notorious recent supporters appear to have an equally tenuous link with religion, according to the AP. Muhammad Loujahi Bouhel, who killed 85 people by plowing a truck into a Bastille Day crowd, you remember that, in Nice, in France. He was described by family and friends and neighbors as indifferent to religion, volatile, and prone to drinking sprees, with a bent for salsa dancing and a reported male lover. Muhammad Abdel Fadel, an Islamic scholar who heads a German language unit at Al-Azhar University, the great Islamic university in Egypt, and his unit tracks Daesh propaganda and statements. He said the group spews superficial notions about what is permissible and forbidden in Islam, and the group's propaganda videos instead lionize. Are we surprised by this? They lionize their fighters as masculine, strong martyrs going to heaven for the sake of God. But it also matters because those who have claimed advanced knowledge in Sharia or in Islam on their entry documents to Daesh, they were less likely to want to become suicide bombers. That's according to a study by the Combating Terrorism Center, an academic institution at the United States Military Academy. If martyrdom is seen as the highest religious calling, then a reasonable expectation would be that the people with the most knowledge about Islamic law, Sharia law, would be the first to volunteer for operations that, in effect, have you dying with greater frequency. Nevertheless, despite the religious justification that Daesh uses for suicide missions, quote, those with the most religious knowledge within the organization itself are the least likely to volunteer to be suicide bombers. So there you go. They're young, disaffected men who want to be strong, masculine, and have legendary 70 virgins at their disposal, who join up for reasons they're not sure of themselves. This is the occasion when I'm going to debut my version of the famous statement, "It's the economy, stupid," which was first used in the Clinton campaign, and update it till now. It's the stupidity, stupid, that's killing us all. And in the meanwhile, it's the surreal stupidity we're surrounded with. Time for another pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and when we come back, I'll be speaking with Krishanti Dhamaraj, who is a major leader in all good things for women, including in creating, well, you could call it sanctuary cities for women. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. My next guest, Krishanti Dhamaraj, that's Dharmaraj. Krishanti is the executive director of the Center for Women's Global Leadership. She's a feminist and human rights activist with over 25 years of experience and hard work to advance the rights of women and girls. She's the founder of the Dignity Index, which we will discuss. She was previously the Western Regional spokesperson for Amnesty International USA. She's the co-founder of WILD for Human Rights. WILD is Women's Institute for Leadership Development. She's a trustee of the Northeast Women's Network in Sri Lanka. She is on the board of the Center for Asian Pacific Women and lots more. I'm so proud to be able to welcome Krishanti Dhamaraj. Krishanti, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are the force majeure behind so many organizations that are good for women. It's hard to number them. First of all, talk about the Center for Women's Global Leadership. You're the executive director, and talk about the center and the work that it does.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the Center for Women's Global Leadership is about 26 years old. We are, housed at Rutgers University in New Brunswick. And initially, when we started the organization, it was really to do two things. One was to really integrate a feminist analysis into human rights, into the kind of where the big boys were. And the second was to really bring the human rights framework into feminist organizing and movements. Mm-hmm. Right? So as a result of that, one of the first things, we have done many international advocacy kind of campaigns and initiatives. One of the things that really stuck with us, and we are celebrating 25 years this year, is the 16 Days of Activism to End Gender-Based Violence campaign. Right? And it initially started as an awareness campaign to, again, raise awareness about violence against women, at that time very specifically, and to elevate it, unfortunately, in a in an international arena to recognize it as a human rights violation.
Right.
So now, 25 years later, I mean, it's, awareness in itself is no longer enough. We know that. We have known that.
Right.
And we want to move from awareness to eradication.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right? So that's kind of the background of the last 25 years in how we are moving forward. And our focus really is around, with feminist values, that we strengthen and bridge voices for human rights towards, equality, social justice, and self-determination. And to this end, we are serious, and we want to see an equal world for women. And to that end, we have to really look at ending gender-based discrimination and violence.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So we know that we can't do that in 10 years, but we are determined to do everything possible towards it.
Okay.
And we recognize that with that comes, then we have to really look at structural inequality, right?
Precisely.
So our aim is to really recognize and then push forward that recognition around shifting the understanding around the link between economic policy, macroeconomic policy, and peace and security. Because we cannot end discrimination and violence if, the structures are still in place, right?
Yes.
It's about kind of pushing the status quo.
Precisely.
And in order to then, of course, to achieve that aspect of it, we need to advance feminist leadership, right? To transform civil society structures so that we would embody kind of universal rights, values, and principles.
Right.
So that's kind of, what we're trying to do.
Okay. That's a big to-do list, but it's one that you are uniquely capable, or not uniquely, we're all working toward it, but that you are capable, certainly uniquely capable of leading. Now tell us about the Dignity Index, because you're the founder of that. And that in itself is if you'd only done that would have been your road to feminist heaven.
Thank you. Actually, it got started when I was living in San Francisco, and I think you are definitely aware, but the listeners may not be, that San Francisco was the first city, actually not just in the U.S. but in the world, to take an international feminist standards and implement them as local law and public policy.
I was going to get to that. Yes, and you spearheaded that.
That's correct. Yeah, under the leadership of Wild for Human Rights that I founded at that time, we spearheaded it only because we felt like we had nothing else to lose.
Right.
By trying to take these standards.
WILD, by the way, listeners, WILD stands for Women's Institute for Leadership Development.
Correct.
And it was through that institution, and I guess Dignity Index, that San Francisco passed CEDAW. That is the Convention to End All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And it was the only city in the world that implemented a gender analysis. And you saw that through across the board in all departments: employment, programming, service delivery, resource allocation. My God. Yeah. And, so tell about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, and at that time, it was a new idea. We were also learning, and the aim was to really look at, can we really have a rights-based gender analysis in allocations of funds, service delivery, and in employment.
This was when? This was what?
And this was 1998.
My God, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, go on.
And we were, we were successful. And we also recognized we were not so successful in certain areas. While you pass a policy, what happens is funding is geared towards that policy, and it becomes the end rather than the means, right? So the implementation of policy is as important, and that's where I think we run short.
Yes, of course.
Team and money.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that, to me in my work that I realized was that while it was incredibly important to pass that policy, and there were changes that were taking place, right? It really that didn't mean that the numbers of women who are facing domestic violence was going down.
No, of course, because
Right?
because sometimes our how shall I put this, our opposition tends to either just feel that lip service is sufficient. Okay, we're aware of it, now go away, or else they're just it's not in their interest, because it really ultimately involves allocating resources and power that they don't want to give up.
Exactly. I mean, there are many good examples of that in how we have been able to shift, but I think along with structural change, there has to be also behavioral and attitudinal change.
Oh,
right?
God, yes.
So, and I think because it is really hard to quantify or qualify the shift in behavior, right? It's really hard to consistently move towards both structural and behavioral change. As a small organization, we felt like, we were kind of like lagging behind.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
San Francisco, for example, went through for 14 months without a domestic violence homicide. Right?
Wow.
And this was huge for us, as not just because CEDAW was passed, but because it was implemented. There were some shifts in the city, in the police department, and within the city structure that was shifting to ensure prevention.
Wow. Right? You'd think that statistic alone would be a model for every major city in this country to say immediately, well, we want to do that.
Actually, Los Angeles has passed, so I'm really happy to report that.
Wow.
And there is a movement called Cities for CEDAW that is within the United States that's really pushing for CEDAW to not only be passed, but also to be implemented. So that is happening. But answering your question around the Dignity Index, why I created the Dignity Index was really to bridge that gap between policy and implementation, and really looking at, can we also shift behavior while we are changing policy?
Brilliant.
Right? So it is a measurement tool, right? It's about how, because this day and age, lots of people have measurements, and usually those indicators are developed by a group of experts and statisticians in a nice office, right?
Yeah.
And so this was about really can women engage in developing the standards they want?
Yes. Oh,
right?
Which makes a world of difference. It's a world of difference.
And then let's hold others accountable to our standards rather than trying to fit into other people's standards.
Yes.
Right? So it was really an exercise. So the process needs to match that outcome. So it's about setting standards and then really developing a set of indicators and a strategy to get there. It's a 5-step model. And what we are hoping to do at the Center for Women's Global Leadership is to kind of integrate this model into the post-2015 Women's Coalition, that is a global coalition to advance women's rights, and really engage in looking at globally, can we develop a set of feminist indicators and standards so that we don't have to fit into other people's, and mainly men's standards.
Right. Oh, this is so important. And of course, the link that between establishing raising consciousness, number one, establishing policies, number two, and then, in a sense, enforcement, or establishing means and ways to make those realistic by standards that actually come from women and affect women. This is just brilliant, because usually things falter at one of those steps along the way.
Yes, and I think one of the things that we have to recognize, which is very hard, is that the world is spinning, and some of this takes time and pausing, and we have to also integrate our own rhythm into it.
Yes.
And when I say our own rhythm, we have to really recognize the inextricable link between women who work for pay and unpaid work.
Yes, of course, absolutely.
And that value, and that takes time.
Well, and that's an entirely different economic analysis, which has been kept hidden. It's the world's hidden labor, that everything else is based on. Yes, precisely.
And I think we need to really recognize that the invisibility of women's work adds to the vulnerability that they face as a result of human rights violations.
Yes.
And that actually women's work in the outside world where women get paid is also compromised because we don't recognize the value of women's labor when it's unpaid.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So I think some of our feminist standard setting hopefully would pull all of this in.
Wow. This is a real composed, full 360 degrees picture that you're working on, and it is so valuable. Krishanti, give the website for Center for Women's Global Leadership and for WILD or for Dignity, any of these groups, so that people can find out more.
So I will give the website for the Center for Women's Global Leadership. It's www.cwgl.rutgers.edu.
Okay. And do we need one or have one for WILD or?
So WILD is with Berkeley Law because it was integrated into the Human Rights Law Clinic. But there is, I am unable to give you the website, but if you're interested in Cities for CEDAW,
yes.
I think if anyone just kind of Google Cities for CEDAW, there should be information that will come out. And also the Department on the Status of Women in San Francisco should also have links to that. So those are the two places to go.
Terrific. Yes, I want every city in this country and in the world to have to establish a Cities for CEDAW in it, and that would move things along hugely. I wish we had more time, but thank you for this, and you'll have to come back on the program and talk more and in greater depth about all the amazing things you're doing, books you're writing, the Center for Asian Pacific Women that I think you're on the board of. So much good stuff, Krishanti. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin. It's a pleasure.
One more quick break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I promise you I'll be right back with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And welcome back again to some fighting words. Fake news is hardly a new phenomenon. It's been called disinformation, agitprop, advertising, hype, propaganda, spin. But if the concept's not new, the quantity and accessibility factors are. The Internet makes it possible for everyone to have a voice, although, as Aaron Sorkin aptly noted, everyone deserves a voice, not everyone deserves a microphone. In fact, this democratization of information, as I call it, has proliferated to a point impossible for the framers of the Constitution to have foreseen. They themselves were extremely wary of democracy and rejected it as being too vulnerable to mob rule and demagoguery. This was the primary reason for the Electoral College, and why we have a republic with a representative democracy, not a direct democracy. But tell that to social media. In the 1920s, the United States decided to turn broadcasting over to private industry, but to regulate it sternly. And this was as opposed to creating government-funded news sources like the British Broadcasting Company. Public broadcasting in the U.S., like PBS and NPR, have always had to fight for survival funding from the government, fight against government censorship, and ultimately they rely on the support of listeners and viewers. And it's important to keep in mind that state media, like Russia's Pravda or China's People's Daily, is qualitatively different from public media, like the BBC, PBS, and NPR. Most developed democracies with press freedom have a great deal more public media than we do in the U.S. Still, early radio and then television were mandated to report in a non-partisan manner and to serve what was called community standards and the public good. or else those stations and networks would have their licenses revoked. In the 1980s, broadcasting was deregulated by, ta-da, Ronald Reagan. And by the time cable television arrived and then the Internet transformed everything, the terrain of news reporting was beginning to have a Wild West look to it. Still, even as news began to silo its audiences into separate groupings who wanted and got news that fit their already existing preferences and prejudices, there did seem to remain a general consensus that people were at best gullible and at worst staggeringly stupid if they took seriously such publications as the National Enquirer, with headlines like, "Three-Headed Woman Says She Enjoys Fellatio," and "Alien Life Forms Now Run All American Major Universities." Well, the National Enquirer seems to be having the last laugh. What we have is not democratization of news, but rather a libertarian view that, hey, anything goes. And of course, so far as the market goes, sensationalism, read violence and sex, is what sells. Meanwhile, Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook expresses grave concern over fake news propagating there, while claiming at the same time that 99% of what people see on Facebook is authentic, and insisting against all evidence that it's extremely unlikely hoaxes and fake news change the outcome of the election. But employees and executives at Facebook have been questioning their responsibility in influencing that electorate. Now, this pressure, internal as well as external, resulted in Facebook announcing a new policy that will take aim at the revenue sources on fake news sites. Google took a related approach and announced it would ban websites peddling fake news from using its online advertising service. But not from posting, you understand. This is far too little, far too late. A Pew Research Center study reported that nearly half of American adults rely on Facebook as a news source. Facebook brags about its influence when boasting about its role in the Arab Spring uprisings, but downplays its anything-goes approach to fake news as if they were acting out of reverence to the First Amendment. So the actual First Amendment to the Constitution reads in full, quote, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances, period," close quote. Notice that it is stipulated that Congress shall make no law prohibiting or abridging, which does not mean that Facebook or Google cannot crack down hard not just on the ads for, but the substance itself of fake news and hate speech. Germany, on the other hand, having experienced where just such excess can lead, has laws against Holocaust denial, hate speech, and violations of privacy online, and has reined in Facebook more than once. But we're not used to that here. It's the frequency and rapidity, plus the sheer volume of, for instance, Trump's lies, that left serious news organizations stunned. No sooner would you begin to investigate and challenge yesterday's absurd statement than today would bring another one, and tomorrow another one or two. Such volume accumulates a mass, and when fake facts and fake news seem to be everywhere, then all news begins to be untrustable, which is the point. In order to have a working frame of democracy, you need a shared frame of reference, which itself depends on a baseline of facts generally agreed on. From that basis, you can proceed to discussion and eventually to consensus. But when you don't have that shared frame of reference, which in a sense is a commonly recognized reality, then there's no common ground. And that's where we've landed. What to do about this? There are things that each of us can do quietly, in her or his own way. Pressure needs to be put continuously on broadcast media, which tends to get easily distracted by shiny ratings. Subscribe and support, and give as gifts subscriptions to responsible newspapers and news magazines. Remind acquaintances that they should never retweet or share stories from unknown sources. Treat such stories as if they contained an information virus deadlier than malware, because they do. Use, rely upon, support, and tell other people about free, vital, fact-checking organizations like factcheck.org, PolitiFact, Snopes.com, and others. Cite your sources in whatever you post or tweet, and make sure that your sources are reliable, and urge others to do the same. The Trump-inspired assault on journalists and the press is just beginning, and it is arguably the most dangerous aspect of this incoming regime. The assault on facts by the fake news that helped bring him to power is an assault on the truth itself. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and be sure to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMClive.com for the show plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. And you can check out my own website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, and our founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.